Welcome to Frankie the Podcast, the companion podcast to the trans visibility animated film, Frankie the Magicorn. This first batch of podcasts will consist of interviews with a number of trans individuals who want to share their stories and contribute to the project.
This week we spoke with Geena Phillips, co-founder of Spectrum, the Atlanta Trans Community Choir. Welcome back to the Frankie the Magicorn interviews. I'm interviewing today Sketch McQuinner, Geenas, and I'm here today with one of my favorite people, one of my longest term friends. We met back in 2002 is when I came to Atlanta, and you guys were doing, in Lambda Psi Phi, I was doing Rocky Horror at the Marietta.
I think we had just moved from doing at the Blackwell to Marietta Astaire. Because if I remember, Blackwell closed in the winter of 2002.
Yeah, and I'd never been to Blackwell either. But I hear all these stories of old, of the amazing Blackwell they used to perform the Rocky Horror Shadowcast at. Not to make this about me, but I will, like I always do. I came to Atlanta in 2002. The first people I met were the Rocky Horror Troupe, Lambda Psi Phi, because, well, I mean, I'd been doing Rocky Horror myself, and it was great that they were just down the road from me, too. I met Lambda Psi Phi, and they were just such a great group of people that became lifelong friends. I'm still Geena and her wife, Laurie. My buddy David Strube is one of those guys who's like everybody's best friend forever. He's that kind of beautiful soul person. And and one of those people, the matriarchs of Lambda Psi Phi, is my good friend here. Would you please introduce yourself and your pronouns?
Hi, I'm Geena Phillips. My pronouns are she, her. I am trans.
One little thing. I didn't know you were trans forever.
Some people didn't. It was never really a secret, but it was also one of those things that was no one's business. And I wasn't as outspoken about it as I am now.
Yeah.
Which in some ways I regret. I never wanted to feel like I was misleading anyone. And also because it's important to, be out there for the community. Because as you know, so many people who came through Lambda Psi Phi ended up discovering they were trans.
Oh, yeah, Crystal. I need to interview her soon.
Oh, yeah, Crystal. Kitty.
I don't know if I know Kitty.
Kitty Killington.
Okay, probably. I'll look her up on.
Yeah. And Naomi. Because they just
is Naomi trans?
Yeah, they're non-binary. So yeah, and other folks, have like gone through different things with that.
Naomi Cucci-Monroe. I haven't seen many updates on her, but she for years was like one of the big.
They.
I'm so sorry. Thank you. They were one of the big bio queens in town. I think is what she termed herself. They termed themselves. Damn it, Sketch.
Yes, they work in Atlanta drag, and they're pretty successful at it. I mean, they're very talented artists, and in a lot of different areas, not just like with costuming, but also an excellent painter.
Oh,
very, very skilled makeup artist.
Oh, very.
And just an overall terrific designer. They are terrific. I'm really glad to know them. I mean, most of the people I met at Lambda Psi Phi, I'm really glad to know.
Yeah.
And I like to hope that, having someone who is trans, being where I was in the cast, hopefully, I hope it helps some of them. That would be nice.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I never knew. Okay, so my thing was, like, I knew you guys, and like, I love these people. They're my best friends in Atlanta now. And like one day you called me on my phone, like within the first year of knowing each other, and I'm like, someone says, "Hey, it's a sketch," and I'm like, "Who the hell is this guy?" It's Geena. Oh, I'm sorry, honey. Hey, how are you? Oh, I don't know why I did. Something's wrong with my brain today.
Yeah, I get that a lot on the phone.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
And I didn't, and like somebody made like Tierney made a reference once to something about a penis.
Yeah,
and I'm like, but it's like you don't ask because it's kind of like going to someone and saying, "Hey, are you Canadian?
Yeah,
you can tell me." Like, it's not your business. So
not Canadian. Not Canadian. If you're Canadian, you got to tell me.
Or else it's entrapment, eh? So I was like, well, it's not my business. She's just Geena. So, and this was like before any wokeness in my life, of course. And not to intrude on, but like when people say, "Oh, you're such a gentleman," to a guy when he does something right, it's like, no, the guy's just treating his friends the way they're supposed to be treated. It's like there's nothing gentlemanly about it. It's just being a friend.
Yeah.
So, and I'm sorry, I led that part of the conversation a bit. My second question, after what's your name, is what are your dreams?
Oh, my dreams. Right now, because I currently live in an assisted living facility, because about a year or so ago I lost the ability to walk. And right now my big dream is to get back into a home and not be in this setting. I mean, the people here are very wonderful and kind and helpful, but I'm ready to move back into sort of some semblance of normal life. So that's kind of my big dream right now, to hopefully regain some sense of normality, even though I'm dealing with what definitely is a new normal. So that's kind of right now my big dream.
So, question 3: what are your hobbies? What do you do?
Well, I do watch a lot of movies. Wednesday I went to see Captain Marvel and Avengers Endgame, and that was great. It was great to see them both in a row like that too.
If there's any, this is going to take a while before this is released, so we're recording this on the 3rd of May. So yeah, by the time we actually release this, nobody will be out of spoiler country, so you can say whatever you want.
But yeah, great work, both films. I felt like Endgame really put a good capstone on the whole, just that phase of the Marvel Universe. I definitely got a little sniffly at various times. But so that's one of my hobbies. I do watch a pretty decent amount of television. I've got like streaming stuff here, so I don't really watch regular broadcast TV still. So that's kind of nice. So I have a little more choice of what I watch. I mostly read online these days. I like articles and so forth. I read some books, but I'm not a huge book reader as I used to be. Especially with the way the world is right now, I tend to read a lot more current events type of things. So, because apparently I just I need to depress myself more. I don't come naturally depressed enough, so I got to read more about what's going on in the world.
Yeah, well, you're a fighter now, so.
Oh yeah, well, and when you're trans, you get a lot of kicks to the head, and at some point you got to put your arms up.
Speaking of a good fight and expressing yourself, like I said, I didn't know you were until you co-created the Spectrum Trans Choir of Atlanta. That's the name of it?
Yeah, that was back in 2015. Yeah, wow, that's quite a while.
Wow, yeah, and my wife Stephanie was in it with you as well. She's cis, but nobody turns down a good soprano.
Yeah, and that was a great experience. That's something I wish we could pick up again. Unfortunately, a lot of the reason it sort of fell apart was me. I did turn over the leadership reins to someone else, but it can be hard with a lot of the issues that trans people deal with. Sometimes it really it can really affect your ability to like normal executive function, and it can really be a problem. But we had a great time. We had that first holiday season. We had several shows, which were wonderful. It's an experience I would never trade for anything else in the world. I'd love to do it again. I still love to sing. When we do karaoke here at the facility, I kind of step in a little bit to try to get people involved. Back when I used to do the DJ thing, I did also. Part of my job was also hosting karaoke stuff, so a little bit of experience with that.
Yeah, and also you were one of the big hype people for Rocky Horror.
Oh, that's
where
true.
You do have to be one of the loudest voices in a room full of loud people.
Yeah, you do. And that is also true. I hadn't thought about that.
You're a born MC.
Also my favorite riffs in that that I do in that movie are things that get sung. I'm like Kevin Murphy that way. Like he's one of when I any riff tracks that he's in any bits he sings, I love it. I loved it when he did it on MST3K, and going back because I'm watching a lot of MST3K right now. I have a streaming app called Pluto TV. It's basically just like several dozen TV type channels, and they stream them and insert commercials, and they have an MST3K channel and a riff tracks channel. And so I'm catching a lot of stuff that I had not maybe watched completely before. And yeah, some of the musical stuff on there blows me away.
Also something I wanted to talk to you both about. I'm looking for music for the Frankie production. Sarah and the Safe Word have already volunteered, if you've heard of them.
I haven't.
Sarah and the Safe Word are their own thing.
Gotcha.
But I also love if there's any chance that some members of the Spectrum, the Trans Choir of Atlanta, could get together for a song that I can, depending on how much money we raise, get the rights to.
Okay.
I know Rainbow Connection is your signature song, and boy, would that end the thing well, but I mean, who can afford that?
That's true.
We'll see.
And worst of all, Paul Williams, who wrote it, is like the head of ASCAP. So you can't get away with not paying for it because he'll find you.
Well, I mean, that's what crowdfunding is for anyway, to
Exactly,
give people money. Or if we can get a new song from a trans entertainer, then that'll be good too. But we've got months ahead of us.
Later on, I will give you the name of someone who might possibly.
Oh, yay.
It's very much their field of interest. They do mostly compositions for choirs, whole choirs, but I'll talk to them and see.
Cool.
Or I'll give you the contact, and you can just name drop me and see how far it gets you.
Garfunkel and Oates made a great similar homage to the song when they did in like one of the last seasons episodes of the season of that show they did. The tribute. It's called The Rainbow Connection, but it's about like the Bert and Ernie characters of a show finally getting married on TV.
Aww.
And Tig Notaro's in it too, talking to them.
How did I miss that? I watched the show.
Oh yeah, check it out. Yeah, I'm not a great interviewer. I throw in a lot of references. So you should check this out.
That's fine.
Have you seen the new season of Sabrina? What's your thoughts on Theo? You know what you might want to check out? Anyway, what, if you want to share, what was your childhood like? How did your identity shape?
Well, I remember probably, I can remember back at least as early as 5 that I was interested in things that were not, stereotypical boy stuff, which didn't go over well with my stepfather. My mom married at 5, and he was a hyper-masculine monster, and that didn't work out so wonderfully well. So I kind of hid things out for a long time. And it wasn't really until I'd say around the age of 11, I started really intensely saying, I really don't like the idea of being a boy. This is not who I am. At the time, I was pretty religious, and I actually would pray every night to God to make me a girl. And that was, that was tough. I mean, much as I hate to say it, it was the fact that nothing happened that was kind of what sort of started me down the path toward atheism. There were other things, of course, but I'd gone from like the age of 10 to 15 or so. I'd gone to an Assembly of God, and one of the specific propositions of that church is you can petition God with prayer. And if you ask God for something, you're going to get an answer yes or no, or even an answer like not right now. And having nothing at all happen was pretty dispiriting, as it turns out. So then about the age of 14, we lived on and off a college campus where my folks worked, and I started reading the books they had there about things like cross-dressing and trans people and stuff. Now, unfortunately, this was the early 80s literature, which was not good. And so I convinced myself for about probably 7 years or so that I was a cross-dresser. And that was kind of what I went with. And it wasn't until, honestly, in my third year of college, I had left Virginia and was up in Ohio at a college and it was not cheap to go there because I was a student from out of state. And so it actually incurred quite a bit of debt. But I only went for one semester because I flunked out. Because I started grappling with the fact that, who I was, my identity. I started dressing on campus. My dorm roommate moved out because he was not digging it at all. And that last part of that semester was hard. And I was doing stuff with the gay and lesbian group on campus. My first 2 years of school I went to at that time didn't have a gay and lesbian group on campus. I'm pretty sure they do now, but at the time they didn't. So I didn't have anything like that. There were some queer folks on campus that I associated with my first 2 years, but there wasn't anything like heavy duty. So then I flunked out of college. I kind of knew I needed to transition. After a terrible winter, I left Ohio, moved in with a friend near Virginia Beach, and did that for probably about 9 months or so. Then I moved back to Southwest Virginia, where my family is from, and my mom helped me get an apartment, and I started working at local radio stations. All the time knowing I needed to transition, and it was weird sort of having a persona on air that really wasn't me. I did that for about a year and a half. And finally, I went to a sci-fi convention in Georgia. It was one I had been to twice in the late 80s. And I went again in 1992 and met some people and had a good time and decided I was going to move down there. At the time I had an aunt and uncle who lived in Conyers, and so they would let me stay at their condo for a little while. So that's what I did. I moved down, stayed with them for a few months, maybe like 2 months. And then I moved in with some friends I had made, like in the middle of Buckhead. You wouldn't know the place now because, of course, It's all gone and replaced with high rises. It's not even recognizable. Every single time I ride or drive through Buckhead, it astounds me just how little I recognize of the place anymore. And anyway, so at that time, I started working on transition. I got the recommendations from a psychiatrist, and I went to see an endocrinologist and started taking hormones. This is like, I was just turned 25 at the time. And so that's kind of where I was at that moment. I met my wife a few months after I started transition. And so we got together, and then after about, I guess it was about 2 years on hormones, I finally transitioned like publicly and at work. And what happened was I like switched over at a terrible job that was never going to last long at anyway. And so when I went to the next job, that was all taken care of.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, because I changed my name in May of 1996. And at that point, getting your gender change was a lot harder. It was about 18 years before I was able to get that done. And for some people, it's still very difficult. I mean, Virginia, from New Jersey, and New Jersey at the time had a requirement that you had to have surgery to get that stuff changed. And what I did was, because in 2013, there had been a change at the Social Security, where all they required was a letter from a physician stating that you were undergoing medical treatment for gender dysphoria, and that was enough for them to change your Social Security record. So what I did was I kind of did a Hail Mary. I sent them the fee to change my birth certificate. I sent them a copy of the Social Security letter reminding the Social Security policy, and my original name change document from 1996. And like 4 months later, they sent me a revised birth certificate. So that, yeah. And now, of course, that was between the two times that Chris Christie vetoed the law that would make it easier. And of course, now that he's gone, that law passed, and the current governor of New Jersey signed it. So now that's a lot easier for trans people in New Jersey. But I tell people, if you're from a state that has that surgical requirement, I would mention that Social Security policy. I mean, it's one of the things that Trump administration hasn't managed to screw with yet. So might as well take advantage of it while you can. That was long.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is an interview. I'm not going to be like, how was your childhood? Oh, totes cash. Next question.
And now for a quick sponsorship break. We don't have any sponsors right now, except for those people sponsoring our Kickstarter, easily found on Kickstarter.com or through our links at frankieismagic.love. But here's an organization we're sponsoring, Point of Pride. Point of Pride works to support transgender youth and adults who otherwise lack access through gender-affirming programs that empower them to live more authentically. Point of Pride is a 501c3 nonprofit organization based in Eugene, Oregon that serves the international trans community. They are entirely volunteer-operated and have served thousands of trans people in all 50 states and 50 countries and counting. Their programs and services include an annual transgender surgery fund, free chest binder donation program, a free trans femme shapewear program, and electrolysis financial support program. Through this work, they have donated more than 4,125 free chest binders and $115,000 in direct financial aid towards gender-affirming healthcare procedures. Learn more about their work at www.pointofpride.org. If you want to be a sponsor of this podcast, please contact frankiethemagicorn@gmail.com.
Was there any heteronormative activities that people tried to put on you?
Well, I would say not even just try to put on me. That I also in my own experience tried to I actually tried for the football team the summer. I think when I turned 16, and I got assigned to the junior varsity, and I probably practiced for a couple weeks, and I ended up ditching out. I knew then. I just even knew that it wasn't right for me. I honestly didn't like showering with guys. That was, and because at school, my school system only had a 2-year requirement for phys ed, and that was right after that. And this all happened right after the requirement for that was over. And I was like, I don't have to take any more showers at school. I'm good with that. So So I guess that was part of it, and just I just wasn't feeling it. Of course, given what we know about football now, I mean, thank goodness,
Yeah.
I would not allow a kid of mine to play like real football anymore. It's clear now that football is an activity that's basically incompatible with human physiology. Now they could change the game to get rid of some of those problems because it's happened before.
Was it like rugby where you're not allowed to do head-on stuff? Like you're aimed at like shoulders or some crap?
I'm not sure. What happened was there used to not be forward passing. And I think it was Teddy Roosevelt was like, you know what? And of course the game was way more brutal than it is now. And Teddy Roosevelt said to whoever was in charge of football at the time, said, hey, maybe like make these changes so that it will, be more, we'll still have the game be exciting, but not have it be so hard on players physically. And they did it, and you know what? Football survived. So it seems like, instead of like running away from the problem as the NFL has done, maybe looking at it head on, because it turns out that a lot of the concussion problems with football are not the big hits that we all think, like, oh, we wince when we see them. A lot of them are very small takedowns that accumulate over time to cause the CTE and so forth.
Like slowly getting boxed.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean,
years.
Yeah, and just like getting picked off and just knocked to the ground. Yeah, that still rattles your head around.
The problem with that, I'm glad that we all know this and that there's more like it. But now I can't watch action movies anymore. It's like, boom, I knocked him out. Yeah, you probably caused a horrible damage. You probably won't be able to remember math in 3 years.
Oh, listen, try watching Smallville. How can Lana Lang still play the piano? That's what I want to know.
Does she get knocked out frequently?
Oh my God, yeah. The first few seasons when she didn't know who Clark was, every time they had to like have him do something in her presence, bonk. It got pretty ridiculous after a while.
Okay, all I can remember is the episode where Amy Adams in a fat suit kept drinking other people's fat, and it was hilarious.
I forgot about that. I have to watch that.
I'd never watched the series. I'm sorry, I'd never watched the series, and like years ago, it had been like over for a year, and we're like, let's give one episode of Smallville a try, and it's like, there's Amy Adams in a fat suit, and later on, what's her name, the blonde lady, said he was taken to the hospital with severe loss of fat, which is a thing people say.
Which, by the way, was also part of an X-Files episode.
Oh, of course.
So there you go.
Oh God!
Which was a lot of what, especially the first several seasons of Smallville dealt with. That I would say that show is probably 5.5 to 6 seasons of pretty good television.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it ran 10 seasons. So you have to pick and choose. But I'll tell you, it was a first or second season episode. You can edit this out if you want.
No, it's part of this.
Because it was really good. There was an old lady in a nursing home who could see people's futures. But the people's futures she saw, they didn't see what she saw. Only she saw it. But what happened was she touched Clark, but he saw what she saw.
Oh,
because he's not human. And so that will set up the whole plot line. But toward the end, Lex Luthor talks about how he doesn't necessarily want to see his future. But then right at the very end of the episode, he goes to see her, clasps her hand, and she sees his future. And it's one of the best examples of metaphor I've ever seen on television. It shows what looks like the Oval. It's always like really overexposed. It shows him in like the Oval Office, sitting in the Oval Office in a white suit, black gloves, and he gets up from the desk. And he walks toward one of the doors and goes out, and he's in like a field of sunflowers. And as he's standing there, the sunflowers start to wither. And then suddenly it starts raining, except it's raining blood.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and when the vision ends, the old lady is dead. And Lex like hightails it out of there because like, holy shit.
Oh, God, I made America.
What did she see? Because he didn't see it. Only she saw it.
Oh, God, I made America great again. Oh. Who are some characters or celebrities you wanted to be like when you grew up?
I love the $6 Million Man. That was like a favorite of mine. And in some ways, like Lee Majors was sort of a role model for the virility that I was supposed to aspire to. I didn't, but that's, it kind of felt like but then again, Bionic Woman came out, and I definitely connected more with Jamie Summers. Also, she was great because she didn't want to be a spy. Even though they kept trying to drag her into it, she wanted to be a teacher, and that's what she worked at. And, she didn't really go on missions so much as use her abilities to try and help people, which I always liked, too. I liked a lot of superhero stuff, and when I was a kid, superhero stuff in non-comics media, there was definitely a lot of different stuff there. Crazy about the Incredible Hulk. And I'll tell you what, watching that show, except for like the sort of 70s cheese factor, a lot of it holds up and is really interesting. Like at one point, the Hulk gets captured by kind of SETI sort of people, like people who investigate alien stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Because they think he's some kind of like an alien. And it's really, really weird and fun. And there's some campy stuff to it. I liked Wonder Woman, even though she was more openly campy. And I'll tell you what, I was fanatical for the old Batman TV show growing up. And I'm really glad that I still love it as an adult, because I love it on a different level than I loved as a kid. When you're a kid, it's really bright and colorful.
Oh, yeah. I was there with you.
And it's super fun. And when you're an adult, you see a lot of the humor that you would not have gotten as a kid.
So who is most supportive of you in your journey?
Probably my wife, of course, my best friend Alice.
That Alice?
Yeah. I mean, the vast majority of my friends have been very supportive quite a bit. I've honestly lost very few friends. Honestly, like some of the high school friends I connected with on Facebook, some drop away, and that's fine. That's not a big deal. Honestly, for a lot of them, it's more political and stuff too. I was thinking me around Ferguson, I started becoming a lot less tolerant of shit I saw people doing online. And that's kind of what sort of turned me where I am now, because I was definitely not a leftist for most of my adult life. I was a libertarian for a long time, and it took a pretty substantial journey to get me away from that. But I will say, I think because in 2015 I started becoming way more open about being trans. It's also changed the way I presented myself too. I kind of presented sort of a semi-androgynous way a lot of the time, and I still unpacking why I did that. But I also realized it didn't make me happy, and it wasn't how I felt. That what I felt about myself as someone moving through the world. So I changed that, and I think it definitely sort of tracks with my journey towards the left, and understanding that how much we depend on each other, that the whole rugged individualism thing is largely a myth. And I think in some ways it's engineered to keep us apart from one another, because our strength really does come together. When I talk to other trans folks, one of the things I always say is that when it gets depressing, it's like all we have is each other. And sometimes that can seem like a really daunting prospect. And then other times, it's enough. So that's been kind of a source of strength for me too, is that being more open about being trans online has connected me with a lot of people that I might not otherwise have met. Just so many great, bright, talented trans people, and just so many great minds politically, artistically. I mean, I know so many trans stand-ups now, it's not even funny.
Who would you recommend?
Oh, Riley Silverman, she's wonderful. Robin Tran, she has a special on Hulu you can find. Andy, I can't remember how to pronounce her last name properly. There are a few others who are really good. I like Violet Gray. She's sort of up and coming, but she's great. And I really like the work they're doing. They're all really funny. Robin Tran is great. You can find a lot of clips of hers also on YouTube. You may be able to find some clips of Riley Silverman. I'm not sure, because she has an album called Intimate Apparel. I can't remember if it's back in print yet or not, but that was sort of early, one of her earlier things. And but she's been at it for a while now. She's really great. She's done a lot of other stuff too. And she did some modeling for ModCloth for a bit there. So yeah, just so many great minds. Like I said, a lot of the political stuff I'm getting now, but also I'm getting a lot of intersections with Black trans women who teach me a lot about stuff that I frankly need to know than frankly really all white people need to know. And that's also where I learned that my journey is not the same as Black trans folk go through. And remembering that for me is really important. Even though I belong to other marginalized groups, being mindful of the privilege I do have and trying to use that whenever possible to help those who have other intersections of oppression to deal with.
Is there trans? Or I think he said he is.
I know he said that about himself. I mean, and honestly, that's really it's not really anyone else's business to gatekeep someone. Okay. So if that's how he's going with that, then that's fine with me. He's a few years older than me, so he has some other idea. Because a lot of people my age, you can get some trans medicalists in there who think you're only trans if you do this, and this. medically, which, I'm not down with that. And that's unfortunate to have that happen. I'm right at that age where I could have gone that way, especially with some of the stuff I read when I was younger, because like I said, I read some pretty screwy stuff that messed with my head. I mean, some of the people who were cited, whose works were cited in the books that I read, we know them now to be monsters. I read stuff that cited John Money as a source, and he's basically the Joseph Mengele of gender science.
Oh my God.
Yeah, he's the one who did the thing with David Reimer. David Reimer, I can't remember what his birth name was. When they were circumcising him in the hospital, they burned his penis horribly, and so they used some kind of like some cauterizing thing. And so John Money took this as an idea, as a thing to test one of his theories.
Oh. On
a baby, he did this. They had reconstructive surgery done to give him sort of female normative genitalia, and at least what we consider as. And of course, he talked to the parents about this, and who were distraught over their child being injured. They agreed to it and decided to raise this kid as a girl. And was never suited to the role, ever. Didn't know what had been done. Every time he went to Money to talk about what was going on, it's like, oh no, everybody has feelings like this. Don't worry about it. It's nothing. He was trying to test the idea, or more, I say, test is wrong because he already had a conclusion in his head, which is something you should never do in science. He had the idea that the social role you raise a child in is sufficient enough to, that's where gender identity comes from. And it didn't work. Eventually, David, he eventually transitioned back to presenting as male. They changed the name to David because, like I said, that wasn't the name he was signed at birth. And eventually, both he and his brother committed suicide. And that's John Money's legacy. So I'm surprised I'm surprised he's not buried in secret, because frankly, it amazes me his grave hasn't been violated. He was a horrible human being. He was definitely one of those arrogant types who views his theories as more important than human lives, and that's just horrifying. So, but the point is, I was reading stuff that cited guys like that as a source, and of course, that's just bad news. So,
what are some of the oddest things, or what are some of the things you hear from people who are, I'll say, ignorant of facts? If you, it can be something hilarious and stupid if that helps too, but.
Yeah, of course, people ask about your genitalia, which is, horrifyingly inappropriate. Yeah. What I tell people about questions is, if you were walking with your teenage child, and if it's a question that a stranger walked up and asked your kid, would you slug that person? And if the question would do that, then maybe reconsider asking it. And the other one is, it's a question if you asked your favorite aunt, if it'll make next Thanksgiving really awkward, then, maybe reconsider asking it. Those are kind of my two rules for cis people who are dying to ask questions. People ask about your surgical status, a lot, even well-meaning folks. That's a lot of what I get. What happens most of the time, though, that I see is that people just don't get it. For example, the young trans man, Mac Beggs in Texas, 2 years straight, he has won the Texas girls wrestling title in his weight class, because Texas passed a law saying you couldn't compete in school athletics under any gender than the one listed on your birth certificate. Max was AFAB, assigned female at birth. He's a young trans man, but under their rules, he has to compete in the girls category. And every time this happens, there's huge outrage from the very people who would be in favor of the law, because they think Max is a trans woman. And of course, people have a problem with trans women competing with women, which is a whole different issue, because there's a lot of ignorance there, and it's something I deal with constantly. And now with the Castor Semenya stuff, it's even worse. When you have Fox News saying that Castor is trans, which she is not, and of course the ruling that just happened, which is the worst thing possible. It's steeped in racism and misogynoir and just everything else.
Could you give us context for all of these things?
Okay, Castor Semenya, she's intersex.
I didn't come here for a brief. I'll just say that.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Castor is intersex, which means that, among other things, her body naturally produces testosterone at a higher level than other people and other cis women. And so what happened was, a couple of years ago, she won a race, because she wins quite a bit, and Castor's from South Africa. And what happened is the white women who lost to her, some of whom were in 5th and 6th place, who somehow think that if Castor was out of the field, that would somehow improve things for them. They started making with the tiers, and certain people in the Olympics area, especially the IAFF, started pushing for a rule saying that for women, or any woman who competes, can't have a testosterone level above this amount. And they just recently had a rule from, I think, from CAS. It was some track and field governing body that is above the IAFF, and they Castor objected to the rule, and they voted her down. And this is ridiculous. Perfect example. Did you know that Michael Phelps, his body produces 1/2 the lactic acid of the people he competes against? And if you know anything about muscle stuff, lactic acid is what makes you tired. And if your body naturally produces half of it, half as much as everybody else, you're not going to get tired as fast as other people.
Gotcha.
That's a natural advantage that his body has, and people talk about it like it's an amazing wonder, because it is pretty outstanding and weird. And you know what no one ever thinks to do? To try and limit that, to say, oh, well, you can't compete at the same level with the other men in swimming. Of course they don't say that. It's ridiculous. And yet a black woman has a natural advantage that her body, they're telling her she has to suppress her natural hormone levels to compete. It's ridiculous. Because the thing is, the exact same transphobes who constantly claim that, you shouldn't have to modify your body to be who you are, and then they tell Castor, you should have to modify your body to be who you are. It's completely ludicrous. It would not be happening if Castor was white, for certain.
Yeah.
Because this is a whole thing of white women's tears getting weaponized. I mean, one of the gals who came in 5th or 6th was crying in an interview talking about how she felt like a silver medalist without Castor there. I'm like, that's not the position you came in at all. It's ludicrous. It's a terrible ruling. It's a slippery slope for a lot of trouble down the road. And unfortunately, because so many people want to stick it to trans women athletes, they're definitely casting a net that takes in people like Castor.
On that note, what's some more advice you would have for cis allies?
Don't be silent. That's a big one. If you read or hear something that someone is saying that you know isn't true, that you know is hurtful, your silence is complicity. We need that. There simply aren't enough of us to stand up for all these fights, and we're in real trouble right now. That recent rule, that recent thing with the Department of Health and Human Services, where they basically want to shield healthcare providers who refuse to treat people for quote unquote religious grounds. Now that doesn't mean you still can't pursue justice against them, but guess what? It doesn't matter if you're dead, which has happened. Trans people have been refused medical care and have died as a result. That's not a hypothetical. And what the Trump administration has been doing is been systematically picking away everything that's gone on in the past several years that has benefited trans people. Although this is not an official policy of the State Department, trans people are starting to have issues with passports. There's a trans activist she lives in Seattle. She's in Sweden right now, and she's kind of an unperson to the Swedish because the State Department has held her passport.
Of Sweden or America?
It's the State Department of America.
Oh.
And because they're saying she hasn't proved who she is.
Mm-hmm.
When in fact she has proved it multiple times. It's a bad situation. And her biggest fear is getting, because she could probably resolve it if she came back to America, but she is definitely afraid of being arrested as soon as she gets off the plane. Mm-hmm. So she's not keen on coming back, and frankly I don't blame her. Other trans folks that have left the country, one of the folks at the Unite the Right rally, who lived in Charlottesville and was there, when they were surrounded, especially the night before the big rally, when they had them surrounded by the folks with the torches who basically chased them into a church where Reverend Barbara was doing a talk. She's been ever since then, she's been hunting these people down, making sure they get identified and outed, and when possible, criminally prosecuted. And it's been happening. More and more of these jerks are getting found out and are actually facing real consequences now. So that's good. But she's in Germany now. She's determined to stay there because she's been chased out of her hometown, which is pretty bad.
What is something that just occurred to me? I probably should have put this. What is the international scene like for trans folks? Like, are there certain places, like, if you were going to recommend somebody go on vacation and they had enough money to go anywhere, what would you suggest?
Finland seems nice. People seem to like Iceland seems to be okay. If you're visiting, Canada's fine. I mean, well, the thing is, well, here's the thing, because we have some ideas about Canada that are maybe a little, farcical. The fact is, in terms of a lot of the background, Canada's a lot like us. Colonial state that ran roughshod over the indigenous people who live there. And it's still a problem there, at least as much as it is here. There's definitely nationalist issues. I mean, now they have 2 provinces that are being overseen by terrible leaders. One of them was the brother of Rob Ford, that crazy mayor of Toronto, I think it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. His brother is now the premier of the entire province, and he's awful.
That was gonna be my next question. Well, I mean, we aren't all like our siblings. Oh, he's horrible, you said.
Yes, he is quite horrible. He's basically what his brother would have been if it hadn't been for all the hijinks and stuff. He's just a horrible right-wing slob who also is using his office for personal vendettas. If that doesn't remind you of anybody you know.
Yes, Brexit.
Oh God,
Yeah,
Brexit.
right?
I mean, that's the thing. If Brexit, because this is a thing too for folks trans folks who live in England.
Oh yeah.
Well, because the thing is that Britain imports a lot of stuff, including medicines, and
Oh shit.
yeah, and that's a big concern because the people who engineered this whole thing gave it no thought of what was going to happen afterward. They steered the bus with the phony thing on the side of it about the NHS saving 350 billion pounds a year. They drove it at a brick wall, and then they jumped out. I mean, David Cameron should not be able to show his face in public anywhere without getting poop thrown at him. It should happen anywhere and everywhere because he not only did this, he jumped ship as soon as it crashed, and that's inexcusable. And that's the one tiny bit I feel sorry for Theresa May. I'm not fond of her at all, but she got handed a giant poop sandwich that she didn't personally make. David Cameron made that. And of course, the Nigel Farage, another clown, who tried to come to America a little, and it ended up being kind of a mini Piers Morgan.
Oh.
Because remember, we punted Piers Morgan back to Britain. Thank goodness.
Oh, we did. Thank goodness.
Yeah, he's there now. He's kind of their problem. Unfortunately, now we're kind of stuck with Jeremy Clarkson because all those Top Gear guys got hired by Amazon to make a show.
Oh.
And apparently it's successful, which is really depressing because those guys are awful. Jeremy Clarkson especially. Which happens, we swap folks back and forth all the time.
Yeah. I think once this thing's going and we have regular updates, if you're ever available for like a segment for like what's going on.
That would be wonderful.
I don't want to say transplaining because, I mean, if someone else came up with it instead of me, that would be great. But
Transpotting. Of course, you got to make sure you duplicate the logo. They got to make the typeface exactly like the movie.
I can do that.
I'm sure you can, exactly.
I know how to find dafont.com.
Yeah, so.
I'm a professional animator. All right, you got that. Trans-spotting. You got it. All right. What is your advice for trans children?
Don't be afraid to be who you are. Be as honest as you're able to. Of course, protect yourself. What kind of support you have available to you. Even if your parents don't support you, that there's plenty of people out here who are cheering for you and who are glad to love and nurture you as much as possible. You're not alone, and you'll never be alone. And that's so important because when you're a kid and you're trans, it is just so easy, especially growing up when I did in the the pre-internet age, basically. It's so easy to feel alone. And to feel like there's just nobody you can talk to about any of it. And that's hard. I mean, when I first sort of came out with my mom of where I was at, she sent me to a shrink. And, didn't do any good, of course. But my parents were pretty good at like sort of offloading problems. I mean, they taught me about sex by giving me a book. So that's kind of where they were at. And of course, it was, typical sort of heteronormative stuff, naturally. But yeah, to kids, I would say what you are is not bad. What you are is not wrong. Who you are is beautiful, and you can embrace it. If you can't embrace it openly right now, just remember that there's a whole world out there that's dying to meet you.
And so ends part 1 of our interview with Geena Phillips. Tune in next time for part 2.
This first batch of interviews were conducted by our producer and animation director, Sketch McQuinner. Intro music by Chicago-based musician Ronan Cohn.
Nostalgia music by Raphael Crooks from freepd.com.
I'm Ronan Cohn. Spread the word and be your authentic self. Thanks so much.